So in their earliest stages, when they might have been able to do something, I think I was a voice kind of telling them to back off as parents. And so those are regrets that I have.
And Oscar goes to Ron Howard.
This is Ron Howard's first Oscar. He filmed A Beautiful Mind chronologically, which is a rare occurrence in filmmaking.
Ron Howard has been in the public eye since he was 6 years old, playing Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. We've watched him grow up, direct Oscar-winning films, and build what looks like the most wholesome career in Hollywood. But recently, Howard has started revealing things he kept quiet about for decades. From the humiliating TV appearances he was forced to endure to the homophobia he witnessed as a child actor, and even more shocking truths you would never expect. These aren't your typical Hollywood stories. What Ron Howard has revealed would change how you see his entire career.
A tough time back in the day with drugs and alcohol.
Well, boy, that was a difficult, heartbreaking time and thing to witness, and it was terrifying, and I wasn't.
Let's start with something Ron Howard kept buried for decades, a period he now calls his decade-long string of embarrassments. In his 2021 memoir, The Boys, Howard finally came clean about one of the most humiliating chapters of his career. In 1972, ABC's publicity department had a brilliant idea: put Ron Howard on the dating game. Not as a host, not as a guest observer, as an actual contestant sitting behind a screen answering questions from a bachelorette he couldn't see, competing with 2 other guys for a date. Howard was already famous. He'd been Opie Taylor for 8 years and was currently co-starring with Henry Fonda in The Smith Family. And ABC wanted him to pretend to be a random single guy looking for love on a cheesy game show. In his memoir, Howard didn't mince words about how he felt. "I hated the idea. I found the whole concept ridiculous. But ABC's publicity department was adamant. He did it anyway." And that appearance kicked off what he describes as a 10-year nightmare of forced TV appearances that made him miserable. The dating game was just the beginning. ABC's publicity department paraded him through every embarrassing variety show and game show format they could find. He suffered his way through guest appearances on Donnie and Marie and the Captain and Tennille variety shows. He appeared on Celebrity Squares, Battle of the Network Stars, The Jim Nabors Show, and the Lorenzo and Henrietta Music Show. These weren't acting gigs. These were promotional stunts designed to keep Ron Howard's face on TV regardless of how much he hated doing them, and he really, really hated doing them. Howard was already falling out of love with acting by this point. He wanted to direct. He wanted creative control. Instead, he was being forced to sing and dance and play games on television. He later said that it was not fun being on TV when you absolutely know that your performance sucks. But this revelation about his decade of embarrassment is just the surface, because what Howard witnessed during his childhood stardom goes much deeper than personal discomfort. In 2021, Ron Howard and his brother Clint published a memoir called The Boys, a memoir of Hollywood and family. For the first time, Howard opened up about things he'd kept quiet about for decades. One of the most shocking revelations involved Jim Nabors, the beloved actor who played Gomer Pyle.
The people that played on the show, he would, if there was a laugh line or something, well, you take.
Howard wrote that everyone on The Andy Griffith Show knew Nabors was gay. Jim was private about his private life, Howard explained, but he didn't pretend to date women or insist he wasn't gay. The cast understood and accepted it. There was an unspoken agreement, what Howard called a Hollywood version of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. But that acceptance didn't extend to everyone. The crew, Howard revealed, was a different story. Unfortunately, the crew was not as enlightened as a child actor working on set. Howard would hear the crew members talking about neighbors behind his back, using slurs. Howard specifically mentioned hearing a word he didn't even understand at the time, a derogatory term for gay men, being used without any hint of kindness. Howard was witnessing casual homophobia at work while playing an innocent kid on America's most wholesome television show. He wrote, "Mayberry was a small town, but for those of us who actually spent our days there, it contained the whole of human experience." That line is telling. Mayberry represented idealized small-town America on screen, a place where everyone was kind, decent, and tolerant. But the reality of working in that fictionalized world exposed young Ron to prejudice, cruelty, and the gap between public persona and private behavior. The Andy Griffith Show wasn't the only place where Howard discovered this disconnect. Years later, when he guest starred on MASH at age 19, he had another wake-up call about Hollywood's hidden hierarchies. On the Andy Griffith Show set, anyone could sit in anyone's chair. It was relaxed, egalitarian. But on MASH, Howard made the mistake of sitting in Loretta Swit's chair during a break. He explained that he hadn't realized she was glaring at him at the time. He greeted her casually, unaware that anything was wrong, and she responded by reminding him that he was sitting in her chair. He said he backed away immediately, realizing that the chair clearly held a significance for her that no piece of furniture had ever held for anyone on the set of the Andy Griffith Show. It was a small moment, but it represented something bigger. Not every set operated the way his childhood set had. The warm, collegial environment he'd grown up in wasn't the industry standard. Some actors jealously guarded their status symbols. Some crews treated people cruelly. Hollywood was more complicated than Mayberry.
Boy, that was a difficult, heartbreaking time and thing to witness, and it was terrifying, and I wasn't sure Clint was gonna make it out, and
Perhaps the most heartbreaking revelation in The Boys was about Clint Howard's struggle with substance addiction. While Ron's career trajectory was smooth, child actor to teen star to acclaimed director, Clint's path was much rougher. Clint started strong. He was a working child actor with roles on Star Trek and his own series, Gentle Ben. But as he hit adolescence, the roles dried up. Unlike Ron, who transitioned seamlessly from Opie to Richie Cunningham to film director, Clint struggled to find his footing, and in his struggle, he turned to essay. In The Boys, Clint wrote candidly about his addiction and the years he spent battling it. Ron, in turn, wrote about watching his younger brother spiral and not being able to stop it. The guilt, the frustration, the helplessness of seeing someone you love make destructive choices. Ron opened up about all of it. What makes this revelation particularly striking is how it contrasts with Ron's public image. He's always been Hollywood's golden boy, the one who did everything right, who avoided the pitfalls that destroyed so many child actors, but his brother didn't, and Ron had to watch it happen.
it was unsustainable. And he'd been through rehab a couple of times unsuccessfully, and looked like it was just getting worse. But at a certain point, Clint found the will himself.
Clint is decades sober now and still working as a character actor, often appearing in Ron's films. But the fact that Ron chose to include this story in their memoir reveals something important. He wanted people to understand that even picture-perfect Hollywood families struggle. Even when you have supportive parents, which the Howard brothers absolutely did, things can still go wrong. Ron and Clint's parents, Rance and Jean Howard, were by all accounts exceptional. They moved to California to pursue their own acting dreams, But when their son started getting more work than they did, Rance and Jean put aside their ambitions to support the boys. Rance became their on-set teacher, their moral compass, their guide through the industry. Jean became their protector. Yet even with that level of support, Clint fell into addiction. Ron's willingness to talk about this publicly speaks to a man who's finally comfortable admitting that his life wasn't as perfect as it seemed. Behind the success, there was pain, worry, and experiences that couldn't be controlled or managed. When Ron Howard talks about his 50-year marriage to Cheryl, he makes it sound inevitable. "I met her, and there was never anybody else," he told People magazine. They were high school sweethearts who married at 21 and have been together ever since. It's one of Hollywood's great love stories. But what Howard recently revealed is that the marriage almost didn't survive his fame. In 2024, marking their 50th anniversary, Howard opened up about the early years in ways he hadn't before. He admitted that when they were dating and he was starring on Happy Days, Cheryl felt the weight of what being with him would mean. "We knew we loved each other," Howard said. "We just had that immediately. But I think for her, she recognized there was a responsibility that was going to be required of her. I felt none of that. And she didn't talk about that at the time. Later, we did." That responsibility, dealing with his fame, the public attention, the demands of his career, was something Cheryl bore largely alone while Ron pursued his ambitions. It wasn't malicious. He just didn't see it at the time. Young, successful, and driven, Howard was focused on his work. Cheryl was the one managing everything else. Their wedding in 1975 cost just $800. It was held in Burbank, California, with 300 guests crammed into a church. Cheryl kept saying, "That's huge," and my mom kept saying, "They won't all show up," Howard recalled. And that church was chock-a-block full. Everyone from the Andy Griffith Show and Happy Days attended. Henry Winkler was Ron's best man. There was no formal reception, just a small champagne punch gathering at Ron's parents' house. The modesty wasn't an artistic choice. It was financial necessity and Cheryl's insistence on not letting things get out of hand. Her father was paying for it, and she didn't want to burden him. Even at the height of Ron's Happy Days fame, they kept things simple. But here's what Howard revealed that's particularly striking. At one point during Happy Days, he nearly walked away from the show over its title. When the Fonz became the breakout character, producers considered changing the show's name to Fonzie's Happy Days. Howard put his foot down. In his 2024 Vulture interview, he admitted, "I never ever challenged what they were doing creatively. It made perfect sense that you'd build this Fonzie character and maximize that. But the optics of now being in a show called Fonzie's Happy Days, my ego wouldn't allow for that. I wasn't bluffing. I would have left. And my contract, I'm sure, had no clause connected to titles they could have said, F you." This is not the Ron Howard we thought we knew. The guy who always seemed grateful, humble, cooperative. He was willing to walk away from one of television's biggest shows rather than accept second billing. His ego mattered. His status mattered. And he was willing to risk everything to protect it. The show kept its name. Howard stayed. But the revelation shows a side of him that contradicts his wholesome image. He was ambitious, protective of his position, and very aware of how the industry worked. In June 2025, Ron and Cheryl Howard celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary with a gesture that went viral. They donated an ornate Victorian-style kissing bench to Johnny Carson Park in Burbank. The bronze love seat has an estimated value of $88,440. On the surface, it's a sweet story. The park was where young Ron and Cheryl used to go on dates. The 71-year-old met his wife when he was in high school, and the young couple hung out and dated and necked at the park, Howard told People. He wanted to commemorate those teenage moments with something permanent. But here's what makes this revelation more complex. Howard can afford to donate an $88,000 bench. Meanwhile, he's been very public about how hard it was to build his directing career, how he worried about money, how he felt pressure to succeed. The contrast is striking. When Howard talks about his career transition from acting to directing, he emphasizes the risk. He walked away from guaranteed money as an actor to chase an uncertain future behind the camera. His first film, Grand Theft Auto, in 1977, was made with limited resources. He spent years proving himself, taking smaller projects, building credibility. But he made it. And now, at 71, he's wealthy enough to casually donate a bronze bench worth more than most people's annual salary. The revelation isn't about the bench itself. It's about what the bench represents. Ron Howard has reached a level of success and financial security that most people can't imagine. Yet he still frames his story as one of struggle, risk, and perseverance. That's not dishonest. His journey was legitimately difficult, but it's also incomplete. The full story includes the advantages he had, starting as a famous child actor, having supportive parents who understood the industry, and marrying young to a woman who supported his ambitions without asking much for herself. When asked about his marriage, Howard now acknowledges these things. He recognizes what Cheryl sacrificed. He admits he didn't see it at the time. That self-awareness is what makes his recent revelation so interesting. He's not trying to maintain the perfect image anymore. He's willing to admit complexity, contradiction, and blind spots.
And the fact that the show really does endure. I mean, it's actually on like all the time, and especially over COVID. I kept hearing from people that it was like a lifeline.
In The Boys, Howard wrote extensively about Andy Griffith, the man who essentially raised him on set from ages 6 to 14. For decades, Howard remembered Griffith as warm, kind, and mentorship-focused. But he wondered if that memory was accurate or if he'd romanticized it over time. In 1986, Howard got his answer. He worked with Griffith again on the TV reunion movie Return to Mayberry. By then, Griffith was white-haired and starring in Matlock, and Howard discovered something surprising. It came as a great relief to find that my childhood perception of Andy was not romanticized. He was as wonderful and big-hearted as I recalled him being in the 1960s. Howard shared specific examples of Griffith's generosity, giving work to a cast member who'd suffered a stroke, offering a role to an old North Carolina friend going through hard times. Griffith was, Howard wrote, one of the most artistically open and generous actors he'd ever worked with. This revelation matters because it's rare. So many childhood stars discover that their mentors were actually difficult or self-centered. Howard could have had that realization. He could have discovered that Griffith was manipulative, or that the warm relationship was manufactured for publicity. But he didn't. Griffith was exactly who he seemed to be. And that realization taught Howard something crucial about authenticity in Hollywood. That it's possible, but rare, that some people really are genuine. That kindness isn't always performance. That lesson has clearly influenced how Howard approaches his own career. He's known as one of the most collaborative, respectful directors in the industry. Actors want to work with him. Crews enjoy being on his sets. He's built a reputation for decency that mirrors what Griffith showed him. But Howard also learned the flip side of that lesson. Not everyone is genuine. Some people change. Some people use you as a stepping stone. Some people reveal themselves to be very different from who they claim to be. So, what has Ron Howard revealed? On one level, it's specific stories. The homophobia he witnessed as a child, his brother's addiction, his ego-driven ultimatum on happy days, the financial privilege he now enjoys, the complexity of his marriage, the truth about Andy Griffith. But on a deeper level, Howard has revealed something more important, that the wholesome image was never complete, that behind the freckle-faced kid who grew up to be Hollywood's most dependable director was a person navigating the same complicated realities everyone faces: prejudice, addiction, ego, money, sacrifice, disappointment. The shocking part isn't that these things existed in Howard's life. The shocking part is that he's finally willing to talk about them. For decades, he maintained the image he was Opie, then Richie, then the nice director who made crowd-pleasing movies. But recently, through his memoir, through interviews, through his willingness to engage with difficult subjects, he's shown us something more honest. He's shown us that you can have the perfect childhood career and still witness hatred, that you can have supportive parents and still watch your brother struggle, that you can have a 50-year marriage and acknowledge it required sacrifice from your partner that you didn't recognize at the time, that you can build a legendary career and still feel conflicted about people you worked with who turned out to be different from what you expected. Now we're curious, out of everything Ron Howard just revealed, which part surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel to never miss out on any of these interesting revelations from your favorites.